Hey, what's up? This is Chosen, and this video is going to be a full gear set guide for the Relentless set, where we're going to dive into the mechanics, the fact that it was rebalanced recently. We will also go over the optimal and suboptimal champs to wear the set, so let's get into it. Alrighty, so first of all, let me go ahead and pull up my set tier list spreadsheet here so you can take a look at how I've got everything kind of rated. And this is why I'm doing videos like this, is to try to get links on this spreadsheet for people that want more in-depth looks and guides at each of these top sets in the game. I'm kind of working my way down, starting at the top of those best sets and explaining why they are so good. But Reflex set you see there at number 9, I wanted to do a video on this because it was actually recently balanced. For the first time since Raid's release, Plarium went ahead and did some set rebalancing, and in my opinion, Reflex was by far the best one that they did in terms of getting it right and bringing a set from being kind of not used a whole lot. Reflex was still decent before it got rebalanced, but now it's a powerful set in my opinion. It's not like broken, but it's really good. So I think they nailed it. What they did was they changed the chance of it getting an extra turn from 30% to 40%. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is update that for you live right here on the video. See how it says it used to be 30%. We're going to go ahead and change that to 40%, thus bumping it up from, I think it used to be down around like 20th or so. We're going to bump that up all the way up. It slides in here all the way up at number 9 because of the change from 30% to 40%. I think they nailed it in terms of getting that right. And in the right situation, it is a powerful set. So now let's go ahead and dive into the actual mechanics of the set. So right here, you can see I've got my Grush the Mangler kitted out in a Reflex set. And if you read over here on the top left, 4-piece artifact set, 40% chance to reduce a random skill cooldown. So what this means is, like, after Grush uses his A3 and this ability goes on cooldown, you can see there the 4 turns up in the top right of the ability. After he uses this ability, every turn after that, there's going to be a 40% chance to reduce a cooldown of his skills. Now, in his case, he's got an A2 and an A3. So if they are both on cooldown, if they are both waiting to be available, it's going to be split the chance between both of those in terms of sharing the 40% chance of reducing a cooldown. That's why champions like a Battle Khazar, let me pull this up here, Force Affinity. Okay, so on Battle Khazar, he's only got 2 abilities that he does, and then one of them is a passive, which doesn't have a cooldown, obviously. So here we've got the A1, and that doesn't have a cooldown. Default abilities never have a cooldown. That's what they're going to do on default if everything's on cooldown. And Battle only has the A2 here with a cooldown. So every time that Reflex set procs, it's going to affect this A3. Or A2, sorry. So it's guaranteed, the Reflex proc is guaranteed to go where you want it when you have a champion with only one skill that has a cooldown. But the downside is you have turns where you're wasting it because so on a champion like Grush, how do I walk you through this? I'm trying to explain it here. On Grush, when you've got 2 abilities that are on cooldown, when one of them comes off cooldown, you're still going to have that turn where you've got a chance to get a proc of the Reflex set by reducing the cooldown of the other skill because you've got 2 of them flip-flopping. So I hope that makes sense. I hope I'm explaining that right. But when you've only got the one skill like Battle Khazar, you're going to have that one turn when you don't have anything on cooldown and you're not getting any value out of the set. But with a champion that has 2 skills or multiple skills that are on cooldown, you're going to have a chance to get value out of that set every single turn. So it's kind of a trade-off, and you'll have to kind of mix and match and figure out which situation is better for you in terms of using it, because there can be an argument for both in terms of getting the guaranteed value where you want it every time an ability is on a cooldown, or making sure you've got a chance to get value every single turn. It just kind of depends on the champion and the situation that you're using them in. So here I've got a battle loaded up to kind of show you the mechanics here, and this is right when the battle starts. We're just kind of testing in the Minotaur lab to show you the mechanics of the set, but nothing's going to happen turn 1 because at the first, when an arena battle starts or a dungeon starts, obviously nothing's on cooldown. So that first turn, you're not really getting any value out of that Reflex set. So we're just going to go ahead and go there. Now, the next time Grush takes a turn, now he has something on cooldown. So now we've got a chance to hit that 40%. Let's go ahead, send that out. Now when he takes his turn, right there, decreased cooldown. Boom. It procced right there. That was that 40% on the Grush. It lowered this 3 to a 2. This was supposed to be a 3 if he just took his turn, but what it did was it lowered it to a 2 on the cooldown. So that kind of worked out well, and it happened right away, where you can see how you can get a lot of value out of the set in terms of really cycling through those cooldowns a lot faster than you would normally expect. And when talking about the mechanics of the Reflex set, I do want to take a second and talk about comparing it to the Relentless set, because I think they did a really good job design-wise, because they both have a similar function, but they both shine in a different situation. So Relentless versus Reflex, you've got your two sets here that kind of help you cycle through your abilities faster. Relentless has an 18% chance to grant an extra turn. Reflex has 40% chance to reduce a random skills cooldown. So which one's better in which situation? Relentless, now if you've got a champion that has a really impactful A1 or a really impactful passive that happens every time they take a turn or something like a Doom Priest or a Scylla of the Drakes, where they're doing healing or cleansing every single turn, Relentless can be great, because when they take an extra turn, you can really snowball a lot of value out of those turns. Or if you have somebody that has an impactful A1, I know Rotos, the Lost Groom, is a really good example of somebody that is really often in the Relentless set, because they can crank out a lot of damage on their A1 and then cycle through to their super impactful Fated Destruction ability. So he can get a lot of value out of Relentless in both ways on that. But the Reflex set would tend to shine a little bit more when you've got a champion that doesn't have an impactful passive every turn, like a Doom Priest or a Syl, and they don't have a super impactful A1. Grush is a perfect example of the epic that I was showing you. I was using Grush to cycle through and crank out as many heals as I could to outpace my Gerp Tuck that I was using to clear faction wars. So I wanted his heals to outpace the poisons that my Gerp Tuck is placing on my team and get as many heals as I can when I'm in that boss fight. So I wanted Grush to be able to cycle through and place those continuous heals as much as possible. I wasn't really worried about him taking extra turns necessarily, because his A1 wasn't super impactful and he's not proccing some passive effect or something. So it's all about cycling through to get those abilities off as often as possible and outpace the rest of my team, so I can really crank out those continuous heal buffs and keep my team alive. So in that situation, the Grush would actually perform a little bit better in that build and in that team, as opposed to having a Relentless set, even though the Relentless set can be a lot better on somebody like a Rotos, where you're trying to really crank out the damage from the A1 and cycle through to the Fated Destruction ability that he has on his A3, so that you can really snowball and keep that thing going. So it just depends on the champion you're using, and basically it comes down to, do they do something impactful every turn, even if it's their default ability? If they don't, then they're better for the Reflex set if it just comes down to cycling through to get their abilities off more often. And then this is where I usually touch on the most optimal champions to wear the set, and then the least optimal champions to wear the set. I already kind of talked about the optimal champions to wear the set when we were talking about the comparison between Relentless and Reflex, so I don't need to really touch on that more. So I'm going to talk about the sub-optimal champs of wearing the Reflex set. So if a champion is based around getting a certain stat as high as possible, something like a Madame Ceres trying to get as much accuracy as possible, or a Duchess Lilitu getting as much resistance as possible, or a Mountain King in a shield set trying to get as much HP as possible, or an Arbiter or a Lysandra trying to get as much speed as possible. In those situations, when their value comes down to having a stat as high as possible, you're not getting any stat bonuses from a Reflex set, so probably not the most optimal choice there. You're going to want to switch to a different route and try to stack that certain stat that you're looking for. Also in fights that are going to be really short. So if you're doing a nuke arena strat where it's just boom, 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 GG. If you go before the enemy team, you win, you boost your turn meter, you debuff, you nuke them down, and you move on. In a situation like that, a short battle, you're not going to have as many turns to proc value from the Reflex set, so it's really not going to be very optimal in that situation. So hopefully that kind of explains the kind of the sub-optimal teams and champions where you really wouldn't want to look into the Reflex set and you would want to go a different route. But yeah, that's going to cover it for this one. The Reflex set is not super complicated. There's not crazy things to really go into. I'm really excited about the rebalance that they did, taking it from 30% to 40%. I do think it already had a niche in the game at 30%. It was just more of a niche instead of being a really good set. Now, I think the community is undervaluing the Reflex set a little bit. I think we're going to slowly start to see more people using the Reflex set in certain builds and certain teams, especially with the Doom Tower trying to cycle through stuff as fast as possible. When you get to the higher stages and the champions have really high speed, it's going to be important to get those abilities off a lot more than your opponents. And in the right situation, it can be a lot better than the Relentless set. And also a thing to keep in mind is you acquire the Reflex set from the Golem. I didn't really touch on that, so that's an important note to touch on really quick. You acquire it from the Golem whereas the Relentless set is a lot harder to get. You got to win tournaments, you got to finish super high in tournaments, and you're competing in a PvP sense to earn those Relentless pieces. The Reflex set, you can grind the golem, and also it makes the golem a little bit better of a dungeon now. The golem is kind of widely regarded as the least sought after to grind in the end game, but the Reflex set getting buffed, that does add a little bit of value to that dungeon. It's still not the best dungeon to grind probably, but I'm happy that they're kind of taking a look at buffing some of these sets in the Ice Golem, because it's going to help bring a little bit of value to grinding that dungeon, and the Reflex set buff is definitely going to help with that. So that's going to do it for this one. I had a lot of fun putting this together and diving into the Reflex set, and it's a set I've had my eye on for a little bit now, and especially after the buff, I thought it was a good time to get this video out and take a look at its ranking on the set tier list. So definitely let me know what you think down in the comments. If you think I have it ranked too high, too low in terms of general usefulness for the player base. I really enjoy hearing your guys' opinions so I can adjust things accordingly. If I'm hearing a certain opinion a lot, I do adjust my stance if I'm getting that input. So yeah, that's going to do it. As always, thank you for watching. Have a good rest of your day. Peace.